Welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf. I'm Samia Aziz, celebrating the power of literature and the voices of authors and changemakers from the global majority. Join me as we explore the stories that inspire, connect, and transform our world. Let's uncover the stories that truly matter together. In today's episode, I'm joined by the extraordinary Juhea Kim to discuss her latest novel, City of Nightbirds, a haunting and lyrical exploration of artistry, love, and redemption set against the backdrop of the Russian ballet world. The novel centers on Natalia Leonova, once the most celebrated ballerina of her generation. After a catastrophic accident ends her career, Natalia returns to St. Petersburg in 2019, grappling with addiction and the ghosts of her past. As she navigates the city that shaped her, she confronts memories of her complex relationships. Her great love, Alexander, who transformed both her life and art, and Dmitri, a dark and treacherous genius whose actions contributed to her downfall. When Dmitri offers her a chance to return to the stage in her signature role, Natalia must decide whether she can face the people and the world that nearly broke her. In our conversation, Juhei and I explore themes of forgiveness, identity, and the transformative power of art. Juhei shares insights into her research process, her connection to the world of ballet, and how she crafted a narrative that resonates with both intimacy and grandeur. We talk about the moral responsibilities that authors have, literature as a work of art, the world around us, and so much more. A bit about Juhei before we begin. She is the author of the acclaimed debut novel Beasts of a Little Land, which was a finalist for the Drayton Literary Peace Prize and the winner of the Society of American Historians Prize for Historical Fiction. Her writing has appeared in Catapult and the New York Times, Modern Love, among other places. Born in South Korea and now based in the UK, Juhei is also a passionate advocate for animal rights and environmental justice. This is a beautiful and deeply human conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Here's my interview with Juhei Kim. Juhei, welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf. It's so wonderful to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm great, and thank you so much for inviting me, Samya.
So, we're going to be speaking today about your latest novel, which is your second book, City of Nightbirds. And your debut novel was called Beasts of a Little Land, which I also read and really loved, but it was very different. Obviously, Beasts of a Little Land is set in Korea, it's a bit more of like an intergenerational kind of story. This one is set in Russia. Sort of the backdrop of it is very much about dance and art. So it's very, very different. Tell me a little bit about what it was like transitioning from your debut to this novel.
So, I have a vantage point of somebody who's in the inside of this creative process. And despite the fact that they may seem like completely different novels, they make so much sense to me in the arc of my journey as a writer. Because my first book is about my roots, my
Mm,
Korean heritage. My second book is about my love for the arts. And my third book that's coming out this November in the US and the UK, which is called A Love Story from the End of the World, is about nature, which is
mm.
another lifelong through line for me. And I'm actually supposed to be writing my fourth book and third novel, which will be called The Divine Comedy, and that's about my faith. So these themes are very different, and yet they completely represent who I am as a human being. It's about everything that makes up my soul and my lifelong obsessions. So my second novel, City of Nightbirds, had to be about art. It's about ballet, but it's really about an artist's relationship to her art, and it really reflects how I feel about writing as well as how I feel about dance and music, because I've been a lifelong dancer and a lifelong classical musician. Um, and those two things have informed me as a human being and as an artist. I get inspired a lot, not from books per se, but from ballet and classical music. So, actually, the form of this novel reflects a concerto, which is, of course, a form of classical music that highlights the range of virtuosity of a single solo instrumentalist. And it's designed to showcase all that that instrumentalist can do. It encompasses beautiful adagio legato passages as well as these huge run-ons, um, something to showcase their dexterity, and it's very appassionato,
Hmm.
which is an Italian word for passionately. It's a musical code. So concertos are by nature very passionate, and I think the way City of Nightbirds sings is also in that appassionato mode. Um, that is also a kind of a parallel to my first novel, Beasts of a Little Land, which I conceived as a symphony.
Hmm.
So, a symphony, of course, has a very different feel from a concerto. Beast of a Little Land was in multiple third person perspective, to represent the fact that it's all these different sections coming together. And City of Nightbirds is in first person voice because, again, it's a concerto, it's for the solo instrument.
That's so interesting. And I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about quite a lot while reading the book is that ballet is not really an art form that is, maybe the word is accessible or accessed by, maybe accessed by is the better word, by like the mass population, if you like. When I think of ballet, I think of a certain type of person that performs it, but also that consumes it. To me, in my, and maybe this is my ignorance speaking, but to me it feels like one of those art forms that's very sort of very niche, very sort of targeted to a certain type of person. I know that there's been over time like a lot of commentary about whether people of color and different body types are suited to ballet, and is the ballet industry discriminating against people of color, people with bodies like mine that are more curvy or slightly bigger, like all of that sort of stuff. um, and I just wondered, like, to you, what does ballet really mean and symbolize and signify?
I completely agree with you that ballet has been exclusive to
Mm,
um, people who have diverse body types, who are not rail thin. Um, it also, by its very nature, excludes non wealthy people.
mm,
Ballet clothes, ballet shoes are notoriously expensive, and in order to advance to the next level in a ballet school, you are required to take a certain number of classes, which is completely out of reach for many families. And I ran into this problem as a young ballet student. I started taking ballet when I was 9 in America, where I grew up. And I really had a very difficult relationship with ballet growing up because it inspired me a sense of dread more than anything else. Every couple of months, my parents were required to pay for and register for multiple classes, which I knew put a really big strain on their finances. And I
mm,
really wanted to advance to the next level and become better, but I felt so guilty about asking that from my parents. I felt guilty asking them for a different pair of point shoes because the first one I either outgrew or they were not fitted properly or they were just simply dead after wearing them for many weeks. And I would just keep on bleeding inside the shoes rather than telling mom, please, can I get a new pair because these are not working anymore. So instead of just getting new shoes or experimenting with different things, I would just put the blame on me and think my feet are not good. I'm too heavy. That's why I keep falling on my point shoes.
mm,
And I really kept on blaming myself. And now I look back as an adult who is able to take care of these things on by myself, and I'm happy to do it. I can afford it on my own. And I feel so bad for the little me, because if I had known that you could just solve these issues very easily by just trying out a new form of padding, trying out new shoes, I wouldn't have had this huge insecurity for like half of my life, thinking I'm too big, I'm too heavy. No, the right shoes will lift your weight properly.
Hmm.
So I totally agree that ballet has this past, and even now, it excludes a lot of people who would thrive in it if they were just given the opportunity. At the same time, there's this opposite side to the coin where ballet still appeals to such a wide variety of people, regardless of their background, because it's a universal art form. Everything true and beautiful has the capacity to appeal to people everywhere. People
Hmm.
everywhere, regardless of their age, gender, sexuality, race, their educational background, are able to relate to something true and beautiful. It's the same thing as if I saw Indian classical dance at a certain level of artistry, even though I have no background as an Indian classical dancer, I'm not of Indian heritage, I will still understand it. I will still
Hmm.
recognize the beauty and appreciate it. In that same way, ballet has such a unique ability to reach different hearts.
Hmm.
And that's a part of what I find so magical about ballet.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been to see a ballet performance on like in the theater, but I have seen like snippets on TV and stuff, and I do find it very moving.
Mm,
I think if you allow yourself to immerse in what is coming in front of you, and I think the thing that I like about it is that it is open to interpretation.
mm,
It is there is a story being told, there are themes being explored and characters presented to you and emotions. Oh my gosh, like so many emotions. But so much of it is also about how you as the person allow yourself to get immersed in it and how you relate to it and what you take away from it. And I think I think that's true of most art forms, if not all art forms. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think there is generally with the arts, I think there is a growing movement to encourage more people to try more forms of art, whether that is practice or consuming it.
mm,
Because I think we do have these blocks that ballet is for not only for a certain type of person to perform it, but for a certain type of person to witness it. But as you've said, I think there is so much that can be taken by anybody that is willing to watch it. Yeah. But your novel is based around a ballerina called Natalia, who has a career changing, life changing moment where she has to leave the industry. She's had an injury and she can no longer perform. And then, in a wild sort of turn of events, she ends up in a situation where somebody is offering her a way back into the industry and way back into performing. And I really love that question about returning to your roots, about is it a good idea to go back to a place or a person or a situation that hurt you? You know, because in the novel, like she was completely broken by this thing that had happened and by the industry, but then she's offered this opportunity to go back into this world. And I just really wonder if you could reflect a little bit on that question, because as I was reading it, I was thinking that a lot of rom-com movies are made of this, right? That so and so lived in X town with her boyfriend or with their partner, and then the relationship ended and then they left and then they have to go back for something's happened, have to go back, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going back to the same place. And it's the same thing, right? That like going back to where there's going to be so many ghosts and so many memories, but the place that really impacted you on such a huge level. And I wondered if you could reflect on that massive question.
I think that storyline exists because as I grow older, I realize that this does happen in life. I have
Yeah.
friends that I no longer speak to who have once been a huge part of me.
Mm.
Sometimes I think about that and I think, do we need to reconcile?
Mm.
It's the same thing with family. There are wounds that need to be healed. And
Mm.
this really does happen the more you live. When you're a child, you don't understand if there are wounds that need healing. You're making wounds at that
Mm.
stage. It's when you have grown up, matured a little bit, that you realize, do I look back and do
Mm.
I try to heal them? With Natasha, going back to dance, you're right. It has that unhealthy feeling. Why not just try something new?
Mm.
And dancers in real life do. There are
Yeah.
dancers who never ever dance again after
Mm.
leaving it quite early,
Mm.
meaning they didn't retire because they had a long and storied career. Most dancers retire at about 30 or even before without making soloist rank. That's the most common path.
Mm.
Um, and many of them never put on dance shoes again. I think for Natasha, it's a valid question and not a toxic one, because what is on the other side of that suffering and that difficulty of that dread that you have when you have to go back to something that hurt you so badly, what's on the other side is that sublime that she can
Mm.
only access by doing something that she so completely understands, yearns for, and loves.
Mm.
I have a certain type of relationship similar to that with writing.
Mm.
So first of all, I love writing. Writing is when I feel most alive. I just understand my purpose, my place in the universe when I am writing, and especially fiction. But I also write all kinds of things. And writing is how I know that I am meant to exist in this world. At the same time, I really dislike a lot of the things that are associated with writing, mostly on the publishing side.
Mm.
It really wounds me a lot of the times. Um, what I have to endure to get a book out there.
Mm.
And authors are very frank about this
Mm.
amongst themselves. There are a lot of indignities associated with um, creating a book that
Mm.
represents your aesthetic vision. I gotta tell you, okay, I hope this doesn't come back to me, but I'm just gonna be open and honest. The kind of struggle that I have to go through every time there's a book cover discussion
Mm.
is just so intense. I really wish that every book cover represents my creative vision. Does not. That
Yeah.
doesn't happen. Sometimes I really have to say this really, really does not match my prose. And this is just one small slice of the iceberg. So I have a hugely difficult relationship with publishing, and I have sometimes wondered, is it worth writing another book? Just like
Mm.
Natasha. And I've become very depressed from it,
Mm.
and I returned to it not because I was offered a chance to dance Giselle on stage, but
Mm.
because of my conversations with readers. I have just heard from so many thousands of readers at this point who have shown me their faith and love, and it still blows my mind away, even after all this time. It blows my mind that something that I imagined in my head has reached someone here, and they care. They very, very deeply care. And in some ways, it's changed their lives. And that is a power and a privilege that I never thought that I would have. So in some cases, if there is so much to be gained from going back, I think that you have to take that shot in art or in whatever else that you feel drawn to in life.
Yeah. That's just as you were talking, I was thinking about how something transitions in our life from being a passion and a hobby into something that is a profession,
Mm.
and all the things associated with that, and the loss and the struggle that comes with that, and how difficult it must be to retain the same love for the thing that you are doing when it becomes almost institutionalized.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I wondered if you had any thoughts on that, on how does an artist remain connected to and in love with the art even when they're trying to make a living from it?
So I can tell you an example from right this moment, which is that
Mm.
I have been working 7 days a week, till about midnight on weekends, about 1 to 2 a.m. on weekdays, um, for weeks in order to meet this deadline for the Korean edition of City of Nightbirds. And I love this work. I love reviewing the translation, polishing it. Every word, every sentence can mean something if you just slightly change it. And I adore it. And at the same time, I am so exhausted. I feel like I'm going to die. I really need to want to just have some free time. It feels as though I'm eating something that I really love and is delicious, but
Mm,
I am full and I want to stop eating, but someone just keeps forcing it down my throat. That's how I
mm,
feel about this process. And this is also because it's not a hobby, it's a job. Like I have a deadline. There are people waiting for me to turn this in. I don't want to let them down. So, there are no like real answers to this, but I think that um, for me, I try to remember what it was like when I hadn't published my first book. I had no contracts and I was working just as hard. It was incredibly exhausting, and I just wanted someone to just give me a shot. I
mm,
really thought to myself, if someone would just give me an opportunity to get my work out there, I will hit the ground running.
mm.
And now I'm at the stage in my career where I am being given a lot of opportunities, which is why I am busy. And I want to remember back to the time when I was desperate. And that should ground me enough that I retain some love for it, like that innocence that drove me at the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's such a like a pleasure in life to be able to eh, make a career out of something that you love so much. But I wonder this a lot. Like, how do you feel like your creativity has been impacted by the pressures of the publishing industry?
You know what? It's the creativity part is the part that I rely on that doesn't bother me
Mm,
because it has not been a problem for me.
mm,
The creative part, the writing part, the inspiration part. It even like it even comes out when it doesn't need to. For example, my third book, which is a short story collection coming out this November, when I was turning in the manuscript,
mm,
the full manuscript was due a certain day, and like I came back from a work trip just a matter of several days beforehand, but I was just really inspired to add another story to the collection because
mm,
only because the collection is called A Love Story from the End of the World. And I thought, you know what, there are 9 stories here, and not one of them is very romantic. And I think
mhm,
that there should be at least one that has sort of levity, that lighthearted, romantic feel to make it less, dreadful.
mm,
It's about ecological destruction. It's about how we need to save nature. So, by its very promise, it's not like yay.
mhm,
But I wanted to put another love story in there, so I wrote another short story at the 11th hour, just in one day because I was inspired and I slipped it in there right before the deadline. So the pressure, and my editor probably thought, why did you do this? We weren't asking you to add more words.
mhm,
But the pressures of publishing doesn't hamper my creativity
mm,
because that exists on a different plane for me. Inspiration
mm,
comes from the plane of the beyond. It comes from the ether. For me, it sounds very hokey, but it's divinely inspired. It's not coming from a place of okay, like my publisher is asking me for this, it's coming from someplace more sacred, and when you receive it you have to honor it, which
Mm.
is why, for example, I wrote that 10th story without regards to whether that's going to hurt my editor's feelings. You When you receive a story, you have to honor it. It has to come to life. Otherwise, I almost have this superstitious feeling that if you don't listen to your inspiration and see your creative vision through, it's not going to come again. This is not
Mm.
scientific at all,
Mhm.
but I just have a feeling that the more I listen and more I am devoted to that inspiration, that source, the more it will reward me. And for me, for my career, that has certainly been the case because of the way Beast came to me and I followed that vision through. And it led to City of Nightbirds. City of Nightbirds, it happened in almost a very similar process where I had this really intense period of inspiration for about a day or two, and I knew immediately what the whole book was going to be. And Yeah, so the creative part is just for me listening to the muse and really following it all the way through. The rest is just filling out the details.
Mm. Yeah, I guess my reason for asking the question is because I know that the publishing industry has changed so much, and I know that we live in like a very crazy world, but also there's so many things now that impact publishing that maybe wasn't the case like 30, 40, 50 years ago in terms of like what's happening on social media, what's happening in the wider world. And so I know that that places pressures on authors to write certain types of books, to think about their stories in a different way. I know some authors, I'm not saying that this is the case with you at all, but I know some authors you can tell from reading their work are thinking very much about, is there something that could progress onto a TV adaptation? Is there something that, like all of these other things that I feel like are impacting the novels that that we are receiving in the world at the moment. And I think it's not just that. I think there's a lot of pressure on authors now that wasn't there before in terms of book sales, in terms of the types of people that are going to engage with your work. Um, Again, I think the role of social media is massive, I think, for authors now this wasn't the case previously. And so I just wondered like how all of these different pressures are impacting writers and the stories that they actually want to tell. Because that first novel where you don't have an agent, where you don't have a book deal, it feels so unfiltered. And you can normally tell the difference as well I can normally tell as a reader
Mm.
the difference. And I feel like that first novel is the most liberating for any author. And then there are some things that change after that.
So many ways I could answer this question. A lot of authors do write in such a fashion. I I don't.
Yeah.
I I just mentioned following your creative muse all the
Mm,
way through. That has nothing to me to do with commercial success or what the
mm,
publisher wants me to do. I actually firmly believe that trying to guess what the publisher or the public wants is the most dangerous thing you can do if what you are trying to do is create art.
yeah.
Books, almost all books, maybe like all books, exist on a spectrum of art and entertainment.
Mm,
If you produce something that you think is pure art, chances are it might not be entertaining
mm,
and it will not find a huge audience. You probably won't. Not at this stage of human history.
yeah.
If I wrote Finnegan's Wake today,
Mhm,
I would not be talked about the way we talk about Finnegan's Wake. You know what I mean? The
yeah.
standards are different. We can barely stand to watch a whole 15-second reel. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? So everything exists on a spectrum of art and entertainment, and you fall somewhere in between. But I do pride myself that I am striving for art, not entertainment. I want my
Mm,
books to be entertaining, but I want them to be clearly art. Now, what does it mean for a book? They all have covers, they all have a pretty cover and like pages in between. So what makes one thing art and one another thing entertainment? I think the intention has to be there. And for me, literature is an aesthetic expression of a philosophy. By that, what I mean is it represents for me in a beautiful way what I think about the human experience. What does it mean to be human? Now that's the goal. Whether I succeed or not, that is what I am aiming for. And by that virtue, hopefully I am making art. I hope that it's good art. Entertainment, on the other hand, exists for the aim of selling a lot of books, turning it into TV or movie, a TV show or a movie. All those reasons that you listed previously. Whether it will be social media savvy, whether it will be accepted by bookstagrammers, how it is all packaged together, whether it's something that HBO executives will love. Those are the questions you will be asking if you are producing a book as a form of entertainment. Um, so in this day and age, a lot of people are aiming to write entertainment books. And I think that if that engages people with books rather than 15-second reels, in some ways that's healthy. Um, I would rather people consume books of any kind than even worse things that are available for our human amusement these days. And it's terrifying. It really
Yeah.
is. So hopefully that's like a little bit above. However, I do wish that more authors approach the writing of books with moral seriousness and aesthetic seriousness. I think that is essential for us to look back in the next 50 years and say, wow, we advanced culture. There were some good things that we accomplished during that time. And I really think that my quality, my achievements as a human being, as an artist, will be judged in the next 50 years. That's what I'm shooting for. Hopefully, you guys will like it as well, but also the next generation, that they can read my books and say, wow, that was a good book. It really stood the test of time.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. And I mean, you summed it up so well, I think, in those last few sentences that, you really hope that more authors would write with more sort of moral seriousness and also aesthetic seriousness as well, like focusing on the art of literature and also the responsibilities that come with writing at a certain time in history, writing in a certain place, writing for certain people, thinking about representation, thinking about stereotypes and all of those things. I think it's a huge thing. And yeah, I mean, has caused a lot of frustration for me as a reader and somebody who engages a lot with authors and has developed this platform, this podcast, because I want to help, create a space that is more inclusive, that helps bring out more authors that are not always getting the attention they deserve because they're closer to the art than the entertainment on the spectrum, I guess, is probably one of the reasons why it happens. Um, but yeah, I really, really enjoyed hearing your thoughts on that. So this book, City of Nightbirds, as we mentioned, is set in Russia. And I know that a lot of your readers have felt like, your writing is so evocative and it's really transportive. Don't know if that's a word, but it really sort of transports you to the location. And it is like your descriptions of place, both in this one and in Beasts of Editoland, are very, very real. I think you really feel like you're there. And I'm somebody that's never been to Russia before, so it was really quite wonderful. But we meet these characters and they're all navigating personal struggles. But what's interesting is that, I mean, as are most of us, I guess, but they're navigating personal struggles within a broader context of state violence and war, of like a really horrific circumstances that are happening, conditions and things. How do you think, I mean, in life, but more so with your characters. How do you balance that sort of that personal struggle within a wider context?
I think that's the moral crux of City of Nightbirds. That's the question that really lies at the heart of the book.
Hmm.
Natasha, who's a prima ballerina, Russian born but active all over the world, is really grappling with the fact that she feels it's unconscionable to be dancing, to be striving for pure beauty when the world is burning all around her. She really runs into this roadblock as an
Mm.
artist. Because to be an artist really means that you're opening yourself up to the world. You're saying the self dissolves in favor of this unity with the world. Um, and at the same time, to be an artist of any kind and to be a ballet dancer especially seems so selfish, and
Mm.
you need to turn off your brain and go into a studio and perform at a beautiful opera house dressed
Mm.
in beautiful costumes, and it just seems so incongruous to the reality that most of the world is now facing. There's war, there's poverty, there's an actual Russian invasion of Ukraine, which she struggles with the most because she is Russian. And I think the book is describing her process of reconciling all these impossible realities together to be able to continue to live. And in order to find out how she's able to reconcile these paradoxical situations, you will just have to read the book, and the book
Mhm.
will tell you. But
Yeah.
writing this book on a very meta level, let's get up on the next level. On the meta level, writing this City of Nightbirds was a way for me to reconcile my moral struggles, writing books in a very pleasant place such as London, while the rest of the world is suffering. And I really, really struggled with this a lot, and I still do. I think um, this novel helped figure out for me the path forward, as well as all the advocacy work that I do related to my books and otherwise. And those activities have helped me justify why is it okay that I'm writing a book and I'm not suffering while other people are suffering. Um, Probably most novelists have to be more empathetic because they have to be in tune with other people's feelings in order to be able to describe psychology. But I am probably a very empathetic person, or what would be called an empath, because it's very hard for me sometimes to even walk around in a city and just watch people. And like when I see people even trying to hand out samples at a food stand and no one's taking their samples, like I feel bad for them. And
Yeah.
this happens to me like 24/7. So I'm easily bruised, and I had to really figure out a way, how do I continue to relate to others um while also continuing to live my own life. And yeah, that's one of the primary struggles as an artist. Because I will tell you this: you asked some questions about publishing demands, like how do you retain your love of writing, your passion. For me, even bigger question, if you are a writer or anybody interested in art, for me, the biggest thing that I have to continue to work on is not my craft. It's not
Mhm.
answering to the demands of publishing, but becoming a better person. I know
Mm.
that if I become a better human being, continue to mature, continue to make myself bigger, continue to lose my ego, my writing will mature. I will become a better artist. So that's my goal. My goal isn't to read other books and try to figure out on a craft level what they're doing, their techniques. That no longer interests me so much as how is Juhei going to mature as a human being and thus become a better artist. I don't know if any of that answered your question. I'm just gabbing, having fun.
I think that's so beautiful, honestly. And as you were talking about the, like bruising easily, I feel like I relate so much because I am such an empath, and it is so difficult in this world to exist in such a way where you're impacted so deeply by things happening, but also trying to live your own life and create your own life in a way that has to be healthy and good and positive. But especially right now with everything going on in the world, it feels so difficult to do that. But also, the characters in the book, like, they're experiencing, especially Natalia or Natasha, she's experiencing like hardship.
Mm.
But as you've described, it's also difficult to experience joy in times of darkness when everything else around you is so difficult. But one of the things I found is that I don't know if this is specific to me, but when things are so bad in the world, I do feel like it seeps through into every aspect of my life.
Mhm.
And then the things that are bad, I feel like become even harder. And I remember sort of towards the end of 2023, yeah, after October 7th and everything that was coming out from Gaza, I felt also this was happening with a lot of the people around me. It felt like a lot of people's personal lives were imploding.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think because we are so deeply connected and deeply impacted by the world around us, and especially now because we are witnessing things that nobody is supposed to witness, because these things are not supposed to happen. We're not supposed to see burning babies and beheaded babies and the things that we're seeing. Um, and so I think that, yeah, that is a continuous struggle. And I feel like, I mean, hopefully the situation in Gaza will resolve, but the world is becoming increasingly crazy. Like, I don't know what other word to use. Like, just the tensions, the politics, the sort of ego in politics at the moment is so insane, that I feel like it's just one struggle after another, and also happening at the same time. If we look at what's happening in Sudan, and obviously the war in Ukraine is still going on, and things in Afghanistan and Yemen, like all at the same time. Um, and so it can feel so disjointed, your own life, especially now, in London, like it's spring and it's so beautiful, and you walk around and you feel like you're on holiday, like you just feel so wonderful. But to know that just a few hours flight away and a few thousand kilometers away, like all of these things are happening, feels very
Wrong.
disjointed.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. And that's why Natasha struggles so much in City of Nightbirds. And I think when you said the word disjointed, on the other side of the horrors that are raging around the world, there are also completely fragmented factions of the world that are delighting in meaningless, consumerist, just garbage, rubbish. And you're thinking, how can all of these things coexist at the same time? And that has come about because of social media. I mean, I suppose the world has always existed on a large swaths of extremes, but because now we have our disposal this horrifying news of what's taking place in war zones, Gaza, etc., and then you just swipe, and then you'll be able to see something completely stupid, right?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it really messes up your mind. You're
Mm.
thinking, how are all of these things happening at the same time? And how are these people laughing at this very, very stupid stuff when something horrible is happening? Or how are these people like delighting in their luxuries and flaunting it? And it's so stupid. Those values are dumb. And I think what we need to do at such a time is acknowledge the fact that we can't individually solve all the world's problems at once. Like, no one human being can do that. So I think that first thing to do is just take a step back and realize you are doing the best that you can in this given time and place, and you need to be okay with that. Accept yourself. I'll tell you something very strange that happened to me. It's sort of a similar realization as everybody you meet is having a hard time. Everybody you meet is fighting a battle. But when last October I went to Moscow to receive the Yasnaya Polyana Award for my first book, which is given by the Leo Tolstoy Museum Estate, I was walking in Moscow by myself. I had very little free time, but the one time I went on a walk by myself, I was walking under this underground passageway in Moscow on the way to the Red Square, and all these people were passing through. And I suddenly had an epiphany that every single one of these people have someone that they love so much that they're willing to sacrifice their lives for.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
All these strangers, I don't know their story, and I don't even know if they're good people, but chances are vast majority of them would be willing to give up their lives for someone that they love. And that is a powerful amount of love that we, each of us human beings, billions of us, again the vast majority, have. And it's kind of a miracle. I think that one of my jobs as an author, as an artist, is to make people realize this fact through my writing. And when we're able to have this realization, I think that maybe the world will become a better place. As unrealistic as that sounds, I really do believe in it. I think that each of us have the capacity to love and to heal.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's very, very, very beautiful. And obviously, like you are writing a book set in Russia with Russian characters. And so, how did you navigate the responsibility of writing about people in Russia at a time when the nation is associated with so much violence and imperialism? And I know, like we cannot hold Russian people to account for the Russian government in the same way that we can't hold British people to account for the British government or Americans to account for the American government. But I think it's still something that needs to be navigated, especially by somebody writing about that place. What was that experience like for you?
Um, so for me, I always knew that I am writing about human nature, which, regardless of nationality, all human beings are both good and bad. I didn't think, well, I'm going to be writing about Russian characters, so therefore I'm going to be writing it this way and that way. I really thought about them as I'm going to be writing about this human being and that human being. Um, People have asked me that about my first book. How did you feel about writing about Korean characters in the early 20th century, people who have lived a century ago? And I kept having to say in multiple interviews, well, they're really people just like you and me.
Yeah.
Because they love their family, they want to do well in their jobs or get a job if they just graduated. They're going to be obsessing about that. They are jealous of people that they don't have, they want, they have desires, romantic desires. And pretty much like what motivates you and me is going to be reflected in these characters of a bygone age. And it's the same thing with these Russian characters. They're motivated by similar things like, envy or, attraction or um, aspiration toward absolute beauty. These are all things that motivate everybody else around the world as well. Of course, I agree that given the political situation, there's an added responsibility as a writer, treating this time and treating these characters with this nationality. Um, and that is to acknowledge the complexity of the situation and not um, not treat it in this black and white manner. I want to mention that the Russian people, my colleagues, my readers that I have worked with and met, it is quite dangerous for them to make it so explicit, but it was made very clear to me that they don't they don't support this war in no uncertain terms. I just want to come out and say that the Russian people really feel so um, devastated by this tragedy, and they don't want this to go on. Now, I think that my job as an artist on the periphery of the situation is to make this clear and be the bridge between the artists and the civilians of one country to another, rather than caving in to sort of populist demand that I don't depict Russian characters or Russian setting because it's just wrong because Russia waged war. Now that's very easy to do, and some authors have done that.
Mm.
I respect their right to make whatever choices that feels appropriate to them, but let me tell you why I think that that isn't maybe the best for progress. First of all, free expression as an artist is very important. So I I don't think just because a lot of people, online trolls, troll your Goodreads, that I will pull back from saying something that I think is aesthetically and morally correct.
Mm.
And I would never put anything out into the world that I don't think otherwise.
Mm.
Integrity is extremely important to me. And then another layer of that is, yes, you can practice refusal as an artist, that's your prerogative. But I think that the bigger role of an artist is to make connections. And again, see the future in the next 30, 40, 50 years. In the next 50 years, well, actually, I have a 30-year goal. In the next 30 years, I want to be known as somebody who is responsible for restoring the Siberian tigers and Amur leopards in the Korean peninsula. To me, and they're at the brink of extinction because, especially because of the complete um, elimination of conservation efforts since the political tensions. There is just no funding there. All the scientists have been fired. There is no international cooperation. So you can imagine how dangerous that is for these animals that need to keep on expanding their territory and have ecological corridors. So, what's really interesting too is the fact that the tigers were extirpated in the Korean peninsula because of Japanese occupation, Japanese colonialism, and the leopards were extirpated due to the Korean War. Both of these were purely man-made conflicts, and they did not need to disappear, but because of human beings, we wiped them out. So, to me as a Korean person, it is even more important to say, look, guys, we are having human made conflicts right now, and you may think conservation is not important. But I'm going to be the one to say, yes, we need to continue this effort now, otherwise, they're going to die out. Especially the leopard, because their genetic diversity is so low that very soon, if nothing is done, they will become functionally extinct. So I'm in a very unique and privileged situation because I'm very well known in Russia. I'm very well known in Korea. Beast of a Little Land is being translated into Chinese. It will probably be published sometime in 2025. So I am known in the countries where these animals still exist. So for me, I am absolutely not ever going to say because we're having a war in the early 2020s, I'm gonna step away from this region. I'm thinking in the next 30 years, when there is no war in Ukraine, we want to be able to say the tigers and leopards still live, and
Mm.
I want to be the one to do that.
No, I think that's really great. And I think, yeah, I just yeah, no, I do I can imagine that like it's not an easy thing to navigate, especially because I can imagine there's so much noise and so many trolls as well. And I often think that any story or any sort of inclusion or representation of a person from a particular country has a can have such a big impact on how that country is perceived. But I think, for example, I'll use the case of Israel Palestine because to me that feels like the most clear example at the moment.
Mm,
I'm happy to read stories about Israeli people
mm,
because I think there are so many universal themes and experiences that are important to read about and to understand within the Israeli context and to understand within the context of those people or those characters if they're fictional. I don't want to read stories about Israeli families or Israeli people that are supportive of the war or that are going to justify the politics
right.
of the Israeli government. I think, and that is the difference.
Yeah.
That I'm not going to give a platform to, or I'm not going to engage with anything that is perpetuating already what is happening.
Mhm.
But if you're if the story is actually nothing to do with that, but it's a little bit difficult to do that sometimes. But if the undertone is that actually like this is not in line with what's happening
Mhm.
by the government, I think that is also very different.
Mhm.
But I, you know, like it's such a charged time right now. You know, had you written this book maybe 10 years later, or 7 years earlier, then obviously, like, I think maybe there will be a different conversation happening.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I just find it overall very, 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 very interesting.
I
Um
think earlier
mhm,
when I said writers need to approach what they're doing with deadly seriousness, I absolutely approach City of Nightbirds with deadly seriousness surrounding the politics as well. You know, what's interesting is that, perhaps some people will say, well, why are these Russian dancers not like, protesting in front of the Kremlin and just making it so clear, abundantly clear that they're against war. I think that they're enough against war, but there are readers who want them to be even more against war, more vocally. And then I'm having to have discussions with my Russian publisher about, okay, we're gonna have to be very careful here. You've read the book, Samia, so you understand why. I'm not talking, you know, I'm not talking about a country where you can say things and they will just let you live. You know what I mean? I took a real risk here. I'm a known entity there. I'm actually quite well known. I like somebody recognized me in London and they were like, "Wow, you're famous in Russia."
that's so cool.
And for me, that has implications for my safety, for my colleagues' safety, and we need to be very careful. Like I expose myself a lot
Mm,
by saying through these Russian characters' mouths that this war is a very bad thing. So I think that readers hopefully will appreciate writers who take a risk. Um, if I were somebody who is not international, I think I'm a very very international writer. A lot of my readers are worldwide, not just limited to America and the UK. When writers take a risk and really put themselves out there, that's probably because they believe that this is the right thing to do. So
yeah.
if readers can acknowledge that, that would be great. And authors also need to know that they what they say has a huge impact. I gotta tell you, I am so um, so serious about what authors can do to speak to truth in history. Um, I a part of what I have to do as a public intellectual is give presentations at symposiums.
Mm.
Sometimes this means I have to critique another novel. And if I find that this novel um, really does not do justice to history, to truth, um, and um, actually misleads people about certain historical events or facts, I get very upset. So there's like a real real intellectual uh, debate, aside from just the news cycle, that takes place in order to preserve true telling of history for the next generation. Again, this isn't about, okay, this news article went up live and then the next day there's another news article. No, these
Mm.
novels speak truth to history for the next generation. So I'm very serious about how other people do it, and that means I also apply myself with deadly seriousness. And if I fail, that's my human flaw, but it's not because I didn't put enough thought into it, right?
Yeah. 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 I don't know, like, I mean, reading your work, I felt like you were so what's the word, like, so principled as a person. But hearing you speak, like, I'm yeah, I think it's so, what you've said is so powerful. And I think, yeah, that sort of seriousness but commitment to values, I would really like to see it more in publishing. I think that there's a lot that other authors can learn from you, honestly. Like, yeah, I'm really quite moved by some of the stuff that you've been saying today. And with City of Nightbirds, what do you really hope for anyone that picks up your novel? What do you hope that they'll take away from it?
You know, I heard so many wonderful comments from readers already, and one that I suddenly, as you asked the question, one that popped into my mind was this one reader who said that when she was reading this book, she had also, by chance, had tickets to the ballet. I think maybe it was the New York City Ballet.
Mm.
And for a few weeks during this time, she was absolutely lost in this world of reading about ballet, seeing it performed on stage, listening to the music. And she said that it was the most aesthetic and beautiful time period of her life. And that really, really moved me. And I thought that, wow, I can't ask for anything better, because I really wanted readers to be immersed.
Mm.
um, there is a part in the epilogue of the book where Natasha comes to terms with the fact that no matter how much beauty she creates, the truth is that the world still suffers. But she thinks that she sees a place where beauty approaches the truth, and that is enough for her. And for me, if you can immerse yourself in this world of beauty and art through this book, even though that doesn't have to do with Gaza or fundraising for a cause, or getting out there, rolling up your sleeves and volunteering, it will approach that.
Mm.
Beauty is not far from love. Beauty is love. So if I can make you feel that beauty, I think that it will open your hearts.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a very beautiful way, I think, to end this conversation. It's been so wonderful speaking to you. The time has absolutely flown. Thank you so much, Juhei, for your time today.
Thank you, Samia. Bye.
Bye. I hope you loved listening to this episode and found things that will stay with you. I'd love to hear from you, so please do reach out on social media and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review, as it can really help.